Right now, without moving from where you are sitting, there is a machine in your home quietly depositing a classified respiratory hazard onto every piece of fabric your family touches. And the company that sold it to you has known about it since before the first unit ever shipped. Not suspected, not guessed, known. And they built an entire secondary industry on top of that knowledge because your ignorance was worth more to them than your health. Pull open your front-loading washing machine door right now and slide 2 fingers underneath the rubber seal that runs around the inside edge of the door opening. Press your fingers into the fold, into the deep crease where the gasket curls back toward the drum. What you feel in there, that slimy, gritty, almost greasy residue coating the inner groove, that is an active mold colony. It is alive, it is growing, and it has been transferring microscopic spores onto your bed sheets, your workout clothes, your towels, and your children's clothing every single time you have run a wash cycle. What makes this worse is not the mold. It is the fact that someone engineered exactly the conditions needed for that mold to thrive, and then sold you a product line to treat it at an 800% markup while burying the real fix in a document nobody reads. The Environmental Protection Agency has formally classified certain mold species as respiratory hazards. The CDC has issued repeated guidance connecting mold exposure to allergic reactions, asthma attacks, skin inflammation, and chronic sinus infections, with elevated risk for children and elderly adults. And yet, the appliance industry designed a mandatory rubber component into every front-loading machine that functions as a near-perfect incubator for exactly those organisms, and has spent 20 years defending that design in courtrooms across America. This is not an accident. This is economics dressed up as engineering. But here is what nobody explains, and why the full picture is so much heavier than the surface story suggests. To understand how this happened, you need to go back to the late 1990s when American appliance manufacturers were facing a fundamental market shift. European-style horizontal axis washing machines, what Americans now call front loaders, were being pushed aggressively by energy efficiency advocates because the data was genuinely compelling. A standard top-loading machine at the time used between 35 and 45 gallons of water per cycle. A front loader used fewer than 15. With water bills rising nationally and federal efficiency standards tightening, manufacturers saw an enormous commercial opportunity. The pitch was simple, and the marketing was relentless. Front loaders were positioned as the premium, intelligent, environmentally responsible choice. Retailers moved them to the front of showroom floors. Television advertising tied them to modern, health-conscious family life. By the mid-2000s, front-loading machines had captured more than a third of the American washing machine market. What was never disclosed in any of that advertising is that the horizontal drum design requires a watertight rubber gasket around the door to prevent flooding during high-speed spin cycles, and that gasket must have deep folds and internal channels to maintain a proper seal under pressure. Those internal folds do not dry between uses. They trap water, residual detergent, and shed fabric particles in a warm, dark, sealed environment. And mold begins colonizing damp surfaces within 24 to 48 hours under the right temperature conditions. A washing machine gasket provides every single variable mold needs to thrive: sustained moisture, warmth from hot water cycles, organic material as a food source, and complete absence of airflow when the door is closed. The manufacturers knew this from prototype testing. There is no version of this story where that engineering relationship was not obvious from the first design review. And this is where it gets worse, because what followed was not a product recall or a redesign. What followed was litigation, denial, and the quiet construction of a billion-dollar cleaning product market built entirely on top of the problem that was never fixed. In 2012, a federal class action lawsuit was filed against one of the largest appliance manufacturers in the world, alleging that its front-loading machines were designed with a structural defect that caused mold and mildew accumulation, and that this defect was never disclosed to consumers at the point of sale. The plaintiffs argued that the company continued to market these machines as premium, high-performance appliances, while knowing that the door seal would trap moisture and breed contamination within weeks of purchase. The lawsuit was fought aggressively and ultimately dismissed in 2014. But the consumer complaints never stopped. Across every major review platform, every appliance forum, and every consumer protection database in the country, the same reports kept appearing year after year. Black growth embedded in the seal folds, a sulfur and mildew smell rising from supposedly clean laundry, gaskets so deeply stained that concentrated bleach left them permanently discolored. And the pattern was not brand specific. If this is landing for you right now, if you are realizing what has been sitting inside your machine while you trusted it with everything your family wears and sleeps in, then support Hidden Hacks by subscribing and hitting the like button. Because what comes next is the part the industry spent real money making sure you would never connect. The mold species documented in residential washing machine seals are not minor nuisances. Aspergillus is an opportunistic pathogen linked to respiratory infection and serious lung complications in people with weakened immune systems, including children whose immune defenses are still developing. Cladosporium is one of the most prevalent indoor air contaminants on Earth and thrives in precisely the sealed, damp conditions a gasket interior provides. In cases of long-term neglect, Stachybotrys chartarum, the organism commonly called toxic black mold, has been recovered from washing machine seals in environments with chronic moisture exposure. These organisms do not simply rest on the rubber surface. They root into it. They produce biofilm, a structured biological matrix that bonds deeply to porous materials, resists surface-level cleaning entirely, and reestablishes itself within days of even aggressive disturbance. A damp cloth pushed across the visible surface does not touch the colony. It agitates the outermost layer and leaves the embedded structure completely intact beneath it, which is why routine wiping never resolves the underlying problem, and why the smell always returns within a few weeks, no matter how frequently you wipe. They release microbial, volatile organic compounds into the drum of your machine during every wash cycle. That is the source of the swamp-like odor that homeowners often attribute to old towels or damp laundry when the actual contamination source is the gasket itself. Every load that runs through an infected machine transfers those compounds, spores, and organic residue onto whatever fabrics are inside. Your clothes come out of the cycle carrying what you put them in to remove. What makes the economics of this situation so calculated is that the washing machine cleaning product industry, meaning the entire commercial category of products designed specifically to address the mold problem that manufacturers designed into their machines, now generates over $1.3 billion in annual global revenue and continues to grow. One of the top-selling washing machine cleaner brands on the American market is manufactured by the same corporation that produces the front-loading machines, whose design generates the mold in the first place. That corporation builds the machine, engineers the specific gasket geometry that traps moisture between uses, and then sells a branded cleaning tablet to treat the contamination its own structural design creates, at a retail price between $8 and $15 per box for a product you need to repurchase monthly. What most people never realize is that the active ingredient inside that branded tablet is a compound called sodium percarbonate, which is sold generically at dollar stores and discount retailers across the country for exactly $1 per container. Sodium percarbonate is a dry powder composed of two substances, sodium carbonate, which is basic washing soda, and hydrogen peroxide, the same antiseptic sold in every pharmacy. When dissolved in warm water, sodium percarbonate releases active hydrogen peroxide and oxygen that penetrates organic biofilm, breaks the adhesive bond between mold colonies and rubber surfaces, and lifts contamination out of porous material. It carries antifungal and antibacterial properties documented extensively in cleaning chemistry research and is rated at the lowest possible hazard level by the Environmental Working Group. Hospitals use hydrogen peroxide as a clinical surface disinfectant because it kills pathogens without toxic residue. The appliance cleaning industry takes this chemistry, rebrands it, and charges you 800% more than the commodity price for the identical compound. The dollar store powder and the premium tablet are doing the same job through the same mechanism. Here is exactly how to use it. Pull back your gasket folds and inspect the full circumference of the seal, paying particular attention to the bottom section, where water pools by gravity after every cycle. Mix 2 tablespoons of sodium percarbonate powder with just enough warm water to form a thick paste, similar in consistency to toothpaste, because heat is required to activate the hydrogen peroxide release, and cold water significantly weakens the reaction. Put on rubber gloves and use an old toothbrush or stiff cloth to press the paste firmly into every crease, groove, and channel of the gasket where mold has colonized. Do not apply this lightly. The paste needs direct, prolonged contact with the contaminated surface to penetrate the biofilm layer and break apart the colony structure from the inside. Leave it completely undisturbed for a minimum of 2 to 4 hours. If the mold has been building for more than a year, leaving the paste overnight produces more complete results. Return with a damp cloth and wipe everything out of the gasket folds. The paste will have converted embedded mold into a loose residue that separates from the rubber with minimal pressure. The gasket material beneath will reveal its original gray or white factory color. Run 1 empty wash cycle at the highest temperature setting your machine offers with half a cup of sodium percarbonate added directly to the drum. The water that drains during this cycle will be discolored, and that discoloration is direct visual evidence of the contamination that was living inside your machine. The prevention protocol is simpler than the cure and takes less daily effort than most people spend rinsing a single dish. After every wash cycle, spend 15 seconds wiping the interior gasket folds with a dry cloth to remove pooled water before mold colonization can begin. Leave the machine door fully open between cycles, not cracked or slightly ajar, but completely and fully open, so that air moves freely through the drum interior and dries the gasket completely before the next load is added. Once a month, run 1 empty hot cycle with 2 tablespoons of sodium percarbonate to interrupt any new growth before it can establish a foothold and rebuild the biofilm layer. The annual cost of that prevention routine is a few dollars. A single service technician visit to address advanced mold contamination runs between $150 and $250 before parts. A gasket replacement adds another $150 to $350. A new machine costs between $800 and $1,500, which is the recommendation technicians often make when they examine a severely contaminated seal. None of that expenditure is necessary when the underlying chemistry costs $1 and the knowledge required to apply it takes less time to learn than it did to read this. But the real problem is deeper than the rubber seal and deeper than a single appliance category. This is a template. It demonstrates how a known engineering flaw can be deliberately sustained across an entire industry, how the resulting consumer problem can be monetized through a secondary product market growing at 6% annually, how legal challenges can be strategically dismissed without ever requiring the underlying design flaw to be corrected, and how the actual inexpensive solution can be completely displaced by premium branded alternatives at a staggering markup across decades of continuous sales. The gasket is clean. The machine is yours again. But the next time a manufacturer tells you their product is engineered for your benefit, you now know exactly what question to ask, where to look, and why the answer will almost never appear anywhere in the owner's manual they included in the box.